We've grown used to the classic movie villain, the evil, frightening guy we already know is going to lose in the end. From Hannibal Lecter to Dexter, pop culture has turned murderers into iconic, often oddly charming figures. But in real life, the origin of the hunt for these monsters was far less glamorous and far more disturbing. Now imagine the 1970s, a time when the police didn't even know what the term serial killer meant, and psychopaths were treated as just another kind of common criminal. It's in this context that Mindhunter emerges, perhaps the best series Netflix ever had the courage, or the stupidity, to cancel. Don't expect car chases or non-stop shootouts every 5 minutes to keep you hooked. The horror of this show comes from somewhere else entirely. It's born in conversation, in the exchange of glances, inside a closed room with real, brutal figures like Ed Kemper and Charles Manson. The premise is brilliant, but extremely heavy. To catch a madman, you have to learn to think exactly like one. So today on the channel, Mindhunter. Proof that when you invite evil in for a conversation, it never leaves without taking a piece of your sanity with it. Holden Ford arrives at the crime scene carrying that talk-it-out energy typical of 90s negotiation thrillers. The problem is, the kidnapper, Cody Miller, is completely unhinged, screaming that he's invisible. Holden tries to play along, leaning into the guy's delusions to build a rapport, but things escalate fast. Cody steps out stark naked, convinced he's unseen, and Holden manages to talk him out of shooting the hostage in a risky maneuver. But the beginner's luck ends there. When Holden tries to convince him to surrender, Cody realizes the smooth talk won't solve his problems and blows his own head off with a shotgun. It's a brutal reality check. The hero doesn't always save the day.
I don't think so.
Back home, we see the toll it takes. Holden tries to scrub the blood off his shirt, but the stain won't budge, an obvious metaphor for the trauma sticking to him. At the bureau, his boss Shepard gives him the not your fault pat on the back, only to immediately sideline him. He's sent to teach at the FBI Academy in Quantico, basically a demotion disguised as a promotion. In the classroom, the students are more interested in sleeping than hearing Holden drone on about empathy and negotiation. On his way out, he overhears another instructor talking about David Berkowitz, the son of Sam, and becomes fascinated. Later, at a bar, a conversation with a colleague fizzles out, but Holden meets Debbie. She's a sociology student, sharp-tongued and clearly knows much more about the world than he does. Their chemistry is instant. They catch a band, dance, drink, and she takes him home. They get into a deep conversation about sociology and crime, and Debbie, being much cooler than him, lights up a joint. Holden, ever the straight-edge fed, tries to keep up but just ends up coughing and embarrassing himself. The next day, they go to see Dog Day Afternoon. While Debbie naps, Holden is transfixed by how the film humanizes the criminals. A light bulb goes off. He realizes the FBI is outdated, treating every criminal with a one-size-fits-all approach without understanding the psychology behind the act. Determined to change things, Holden audits university classes and tries to recruit a famous professor. The guy shuts him down instantly, loathing the idea of helping the feds and suspecting Holden is some kind of spy. Holden's life truly changes when he meets Bill Tench in the cafeteria. Bill is the classic veteran, a noir-style cop who's seen it all and is tired of most of it. He works in the behavioral science unit and invites Holden to join him on a road trip across the country, teaching FBI techniques to local police departments. The first stop is tense. Local cops are on edge following a recent brutal murder. Holden tries to explain criminal psychology using Charles Manson as an example. Bad move. The cops are livid, thinking he's defending monsters.
Just bad. Can we be a little bit more specific? Technically, he didn't kill anybody.
Look at those eyes. How can you not say that dude's evil?
One officer, Frank, takes offense, but then apologizes and presents the real case involving a woman and her son. Faced with the photos, Holden freezes. He admits to the officer that the FBI has no idea why this happened. They lack the tools to understand this level of madness. In the car, Holden is shaken by his own ignorance. Bill, pragmatic as ever, gives him a reality check. If he's going to have a breakdown, do it on the phone with his girlfriend, not in front of the local heat. The vibe changes with some awkward office politics. A man sees a colleague looking for tape and tries to help, but the interaction is so clumsy that the guy would rather leave without the tape than continue the conversation. On a flight with Bill, Holden pitches a genius idea: interview Charles Manson. Bill, who has more common sense in his pinky than Holden has in his whole body, shuts it down. To the veteran, giving a platform to a famous lunatic is asking for trouble, but the seed is planted. At a local precinct, a detective suggests a more accessible name: Ed Kemper, the co-ed killer. For those unfamiliar with his rap sheet, Kemper Kemper is a giant who murdered his grandparents as a teen, convinced doctors he was cured, got out, and killed 6 students plus his own mother, a psychiatrist's worst nightmare. At a bar, a local cop mentions that Kemper was actually a nice guy. He used to hang out at the cop bar and dreamed of being a policeman, but was rejected due to his size. The classic wolf in sheep's clothing. Bill thinks it's a terrible idea. Before Holden enters in the prison, Bill gives him a terrifying warning. If Holden goes in armed, Kemper will take the gun and kill him. Holden gulps and goes in unarmed. Very Clarice Starling in The Silence of the Lambs, but without the glass partition. The meeting with Kemper is surreal. The man is a human mountain, yet he speaks with the calm of a monk and the manners of a butler. He removes his handcuffs, sits down, and offers Holden an egg salad sandwich. The conversation flows. Kemper explains his parallel life of horrors and how he appears normal on the outside. He talks about lobotomies, torture, and how the police never truly understand the mind of a hunter. Holden leaves with his head spinning. Back in his personal life, Holden is so obsessed he can only talk about Kemper, even during a romantic dinner with Debbie. His girlfriend, who is socially light years ahead of him, gives him a golden tip. To get the truth out of a guy like that, you have to open up and show vulnerability. Holden takes notes. On the second visit, Holden tries Debbie's tactic. He starts talking about his own life and insecurities to break the ice. It works. Kemper opens up and begins detailing his crimes in a technical, disturbing way, talking about human anatomy like a butcher.
Mommy, you feel this? You feel it. It's all muscle, cartilaginous.
Meanwhile, a real case pops up in Sacramento. On the way, Bill explains the case involving an elderly woman and her dog. Local police suspect a hate crime or a satanic ritual because of the full moon. Holden and Bill visit the scene. Using his new superpower, Holden profiles the perp on the spot. It's not a gang or Satanists. It's a lonely neighborhood teen with self-esteem issues who probably doesn't bathe. Bill remains skeptical. Frustrated by the bureaucracy, Bill finally decides to see the monster for himself. During the third visit, Bill tries to play the tough guy, but Kemper dominates the room. He tells the story of his mother, the root of all his evil. She humiliated him, locked him in the basement, and destroyed his self-worth. It's mommy issues leveled up to the point where Norman looks like a golden son. Back at the FBI, Shepard is furious. The unauthorized visits have been discovered. Holden wants to fight the system, but Bill makes a master move. He invades the boss's office and sells the vision. To catch a madman, you have to know how he thinks. Shepard reluctantly agrees, but in true X-Files fashion, they are sent to the basement, literally. They get a cramped office sublevel and permission to continue the interviews. The behavioral science unit is born, straight out of the FBI's dungeon. Holden and Bill land in Boston, but they aren't there for a Red Sox game. It's an academic mission. Holden, in a classic display of zero social grace, tries to give health tips to a random woman in the hallway, only to discover she's exactly who they came to see, Dr. Wendy. And she is sharp. She's already read Holden's messy notes and sees the potential immediately. Wendy gives it to them straight. Serial killers and high-level CEOs have a lot in common, the psychopathic profile. The only difference is one destroys lives physically, while the other destroys the economy. She's impressed, but gives the duo a wake-up call. Without recordings and a scientific method, this is just prison gossip. She suggests formalizing everything with a standardized questionnaire. Bill is wary of bureau red tape, but Wendy sells him on the goal. Understanding the mind of someone capable of deriving pleasure from extreme behavior is something no police report can explain. Back at base, the phone rings. It's a call from California regarding the brutal murder of an elderly woman and her dog.
What's up?
Carver, there's been another one, the same age as Rosemary Gonzalez, only this time she's dead.
Shepard, in an administrative miracle, clears the trip. When they arrive, the local police are lost, still clinging to satanic ritual theories. Holden goes modern Sherlock and builds a profile. The killer isn't a gang, but a white male, a loner, frustrated, likely living with a domineering mother. They track down a suspect, Dwight Taylor. The vibe at the guy's house is more tense than a season finale. His mother controls the very air he breathes. Bill and Holden take him for a drive and apply pressure. They discover that Dwight had a girlfriend, but his mother kept interfering in the relationship, which ultimately led to its end. The guy is a pressure cooker of maternal resentment. When Holden presses him about scratches on his arm, Dwight breaks down and cries. Bingo. Shortly after, it's on the news. Dwight is arrested and confesses. The local detective is amazed, calling Holden Sherlock and Bill Watson, inflating Holden's ego to dangerous levels. Since they're in the neighborhood, the dynamic duo returns to visit their friend Ed Kemper, this time armed with a decent tape recorder. Kemper, calm as someone ordering a pizza, deconstructs the Hollywood myth. He explains that stabbing someone isn't like the movies. It's hard work and it's messy. The conversation descends into the depths of hell when he talks about his mother again. He killed her because she wouldn't shut up and kept humiliating him. Holden listens, fascinated, while Bill looks like he's going to lose his lunch. On the flight back, Bill confesses that being near Kemper is like staring into a black hole. There's nothing there, just a void. He realizes that, as bizarre as it is, Holden has a natural talent for this. Bill decides they need Wendy to organize this madness before the FBI shuts them down. Holden goes home to Debbie, and their domestic scenes start mixing serial killer talk with intimacy, showing that his head is no longer in a normal place. But the focus is the job. They convince Wendy to move to Virginia. She arrives ready to level up the game. During a philosophical debate, Wendy drops a bombshell. How does anyone become president of the United States without being a little bit of a psychopath? The trio is formed, and the BSU is about to move from a basement hobby to a serious operation. Bill and Holden are back on the road, and this time the target is Monty Rissel. The interview starts with the usual tension. No guns, no badges, just a recorder, and 2 agents against a psychopath.
My name's Bill Tench. This is my partner, Holden Ford.
Rissel's first demand, a big red soda. He's willing to trade homicide confessions for a soft drink, proving his mind is stuck in adolescence. Unlike Kemper, who speaks like a professor, Rissel is pure impulse. He drops one of the most chilling analogies of the series. He says the urge to kill hits his brain like a sneeze. It just happens, and you can't hold it back. He explains it all started with a breakup letter. Frustrated, he went out to vent his rage, and the first victim he crossed paid the price. He killed some because they screamed or asked too many questions. Essentially, he kills to make women be quiet, a horrifying look into his psyche. Leaving the prison, reality hits hard, literally. A car clips Holden's side in a minor fender bender. No one is seriously hurt, but Bill loses it, nearly assaulting the other driver. It's clear the problem isn't the bumper. The veteran is at his breaking point. Later, he opens up to Holden. Bill's adopted son, Brian, hasn't spoken a word in years. Bill feels like he's failing at home while spending his days listening to monsters complain about their parents. The weight is massive. Back at the lab, Dr. Wendy listens to the tapes and works her magic. She connects the dots. Rissel kills to regain the control he's lost elsewhere in his life. If a woman doesn't react the way he wants, he eliminates the problem. Wendy introduces the concept that will guide the series. The difference between the organized killer, like Kemper, who plans, and the disorganized killer, like Rissel, who acts on impulse and leaves a mess behind. The duo travels to Pennsylvania to teach, and a local cop, Mark, asks for help on a gruesome case. A woman, Beverly, was found mutilated in a dump. Holden, with an ego now larger than the FBI building, starts calling shots like he's Sherlock Holmes. They suspect a man named Alvin, a former drifter who found the body. Holden is certain he's the guy, but Alvin's wife confirms his alibi. There's no 40-minute CSI resolution here. They don't solve it immediately, which serves to take Holden down a peg. In the middle of this, there's a social gathering where Debbie meets Wendy. Holden asks if Debbie feels intimidated by the doctor's intelligence, and in a rare moment of clarity, Debbie notes that Holden doesn't suffer from that specific type of male fragility. The episode closes with a shock. Shepard summons the trio to his office. The mood is funereal. It seems Wendy has been talking too much about the secret project at high society parties, and info leaked. Shepard chews them out, accusing the team of exposing the Bureau. But then comes the plot twist. Wendy's gossip reached the right ears. The interest was so high that they've secured a massive federal grant. What was a backyard project now has a budget in the hundreds of thousands. They step into the elevator with the smirks of people who just hit the jackpot. The game has changed.
Has awarded you an additional $185,000.
You can't be serious.
This amount of money comes with considerable scrutiny.
Holden and Bill remain in Pennsylvania, focused on Benjamin Barnwright, the prime suspect in the brutal murder of Beverly. The guy radiates wouldn't hurt a fly vibes, but the victim's hair was found in his car. When the agents arrive, Benjamin is waiting with the oldest trick in the book, offering donuts to the police. During the interrogation, Benjamin launches into a dramatic monologue about how Beverly was his first, and how they plan to move in together. He cries uncontrollably, giving a performance worthy of a cheap soap opera or a Razzie Award nominee. Bill, his lie detector radar blaring, doesn't buy it for a second. To the veteran, those are pure crocodile tears. The duo decides to investigate the family. Benjamin's mother paints her son as a saint and introduces Frank, the brother-in-law living with her daughter, Rose. Frank is described as the family protector, the guy who fixes things. However, they soon discover Frank's rap sheet is longer than a CVS receipt. The man was once institutionalized for attacking a girl with a tire iron. Basically, we have a cast of characters straight out of a rural horror movie. Meanwhile, Dr. Wendy is packing for Boston, but not before dropping some wisdom. On the way to the airport, Holden comments on Benjamin's forced weeping. Wendy, with her signature surgical coldness, explains that psychopaths learn to mimic human emotions to manipulate others. It's like the Terminator trying to smile, just without the robots. Holden drops by his girlfriend Debbie's place. She's totally wired, pulling an all-nighter on stimulants. In a moment of chemical honesty, she confirms the theory. People use crying to get what they want. She's even done it herself to bump up her college grades. Holden realizes that if a sociology student can play a professor, a killer can easily play the cops. Back on the case, Bill and Holden bring Frank in. The guy is aggressive, denies everything, and presents a rock-solid alibi. He was picking up dinner. They try to squeeze Benjamin again, but the kid goes into full defensive mode, doing nothing but sobbing, which drives Bill insane.
She loved me.
But she wasn't exactly saving herself for marriage. Do you think you satisfied her, Benjamin?
The investigation hits a wall until Mark, the local cop, notices a crucial detail: bruises on the arm of Rose, Benjamin's sister, and Frank's wife. Mark plays the empathy card. He promises to protect the baby if she tells the truth. That's when the dam breaks. Rose collapses and reveals the dinner alibi was a lie. In a twist worthy of Psycho, Rose tells the real disturbing story. On the night of the crime, Frank wasn't buying food. He was called urgently by Benjamin. When Rose arrived at her mother's house, she found a horror movie scene. Her brother Benjamin was in the bathroom with Beverly's body in the tub. The family crisis manager was coordinating the cleanup. The most macabre part, Frank forced his own pregnant wife to scrub the blood and hide the knife, acting like a twisted, domestic version of the wolf from Pulp Fiction. With the confession, the police finally arrest Benjamin, ending the episode with the bitter realization that sometimes evil is a family business. The ABT guy, that creepy alarm technician who pops up out of nowhere, continues his macabre routine, tying knots while his wife tends to the baby. If that doesn't scream serial killer in training, I don't know what does. But let's focus. Shepard calls Dr. Wendy in for a chat and puts an offer on the table, a permanent position at Quantico. The dream team is forming, but Wendy hesitates. After all, she has a life, a job, and a girlfriend waiting in Boston. The boss tells her to sleep on it, but demands absolute secrecy. Back in Pennsylvania's most depressing interrogation room, Bill and Holden are playing mental ping pong with Benjamin and his lawyer. Benjamin insists he didn't kill Beverly, and that Frank is the real monster. Frank, with all the arrogance of a B-movie villain, dumps everything on his weeping brother-in-law. Things get ugly when Benjamin finally confesses to stabbing the woman, but swears she was already dead. He says he did it because Frank kept complimenting her hair just to spite him. While trying to process this insanity, Bill decides he needs a mental break and invites Holden to dinner. Holden asks if he can bring Debbie. Bill agrees. The dinner is a classic meet the parents awkward moment. Nancy, Bill's wife, is nice enough, but the mood shifts when Holden tries to interact with Brian, their adopted son who doesn't speak a word. Holden tries to play with blocks, but the kid is a statue.
I always used to see how tall I could make the tower before it fell over. Uh-oh.
During dinner, a conversation about adoption and fatherhood makes everyone uncomfortable. Nancy admits she adopted more for herself than for the boy, leading to a cringeworthy silence. Later, Bill admits to Holden that he barely spoke to his own father, and that the cycle of absent fathers seems never-ending, but the work never stops. Wendy, listening to the tapes of Rose's interrogation, has a Sherlock Holmes moment. She notices Rose used the present tense when describing the blood spraying, meaning the victim was still alive when they started the cleanup. Bingo! All three, Benjamin, Frank, and Rose, are guilty. The problem? The local DA is lazy and just wants to close the case. He plans to pin everything on Benjamin and cut a deal with Frank. Since Bill is bogged down in paperwork, he sends Holden and Wendy to convince the DA not to blow it. Wendy gives a masterclass in criminal logic, explaining that Frank is the master manipulator and cannot go free. The DA gives them a sure Jan look and dismisses them. Wendy takes the opportunity to go to Boston to see her girlfriend, Annalise. The reunion is lukewarm. Annalise is part of that intellectual elite that views FBI work as a lowbrow waste of time. At a bar with Annalise's snobbish friends, Wendy realizes she doesn't belong in that world anymore. It's the turning point. She leaves the drink, the boring conversation, and decides to head back to where the action is. Back in Pennsylvania, the news is grim. The DA ignored everything. Frank, the real psychopath, took a deal, pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter, and will spend a few years in a psychiatric clinic. Benjamin, the manipulated pawn, is headed for death row. It's a bitter ending where justice is nowhere to be found, proving the system is more flawed than a stormtrooper's aim. Frustrated, the team huddles up and Wendy takes charge. She says if they can't change the system, they have to be smarter. She presents their next target, Jerry Brudos. Wendy decrees they will now use a standardized questionnaire for all killers, professionalizing the operation. To seal the deal, she picks an office in the basement and announces she's staying for good. Wendy is officially part of the team.
Do you mind if I take that room?
For what?
For my office?
Oh, sure, fine. Go ahead.
Do you need help?
No.
Having even rented an apartment near Quantico, leaving her Boston life behind. The FBI better watch out. Bill and Holden arrive at the prison to interview the new star of the freak show, Jerry Brudos. The guy arrives with an attitude, laughing and making demands like he's at a 5-star hotel, asking for cigarettes and pizza. Bill shuts him down immediately, but Brudos reveals he's just jerking them around. He agrees to talk, but it's all double talk. He denies killing anyone, claims his confessions were coerced, and says it's all a police frame-up. Things heat up when Holden puts a crime scene photo on the table. Brudos takes a dramatic beat and says he doesn't remember taking the photo. But Bill, with his detective's instinct, shows that Brudos' own reflection is visible in the picture. Checkmate, right? Wrong. Brudos just laughs, calls them idiots, and mentions that Ed Kemper was right about FBI agents being cowards. Yes, the serial killers are gossiping about them in prison. Back at HQ, Dr. Wendy listens to the tape, and instead of being horrified, she's fascinated. She realizes Brudos is a pathological liar who shuts down when cornered. Her strategy is clear. Stop acting like tough cops and start massaging the monster's ego. She suggests they make up stories, create fake empathy, and validate his fantasies. Bill hates the idea. Being nice to a guy like that makes his skin crawl, but Holden is willing to do anything for the science. Speaking of Holden, he takes the research a bit too seriously. During a mall trip with Debbie, instead of focusing on his date, he becomes obsessed with high-heeled shoes. He buys a huge pair in a moment that feels like a distorted, bizarre version of Cinderella. The duo returns to the prison, this time following Wendy's script. Holden offers cigarettes, takes off the handcuffs, and drops the bait, the pair of heels he bought. Brudos bites instantly. Bill, swallowing his pride and his gorge, joins in and lies about his wife, inventing details to create a connection. Brudos finally opens up and shares his origin story. His mother burned a pair of shoes he found in the trash as a child, traumatizing him forever. The mood gets heavy, and Brudos asks for a private moment with the shoes right there in the interview room. Yeah, exactly what you're thinking happens, and Bill calls the guard immediately, ending the grossest session in the unit's history.
Tony!
That was amazing.
Yeah, that was great.
Meanwhile, Wendy has her own solitary subplot, feeding a mysterious cat in her apartment basement, giving off indie suspense movie vibes. But the real drama is at Bill's house. The nanny finds a crime scene photo, the one with the broom, under his son Brian's bed. The boy saw it. The nanny quits on the spot, and Nancy is livid. Bill's marriage is falling apart in Marriage Story fashion, with arguments about their troubled son and his work invading the home. In the middle of the chaos, Bill has an epiphany. He realizes the knots used in the unsolved Pennsylvania case are nautical knots. He tries to bury himself in work to escape his personal problems, but Wendy brushes him off, reminding him she's a colleague, not a therapist. To close the episode on a high note, Holden goes to dinner at Debbie's. The mood is good, he tries to be romantic, and there's even some weird marriage talk. But when they go to the bedroom and Debbie appears, Holden's brain short-circuits. He looks at the shoes and can only see Jerry Brudos enjoying himself in the interrogation room. The work trauma completely kills the moment, proving that hunting monsters comes at a high personal price. Debbie realizes the vibe is dead and leaves Holden alone with his thoughts and the shoes. Holden now faces an audience much harder to handle than serial killers, elementary school kids. He's been invited to give a talk, but the principal, Roger Wade, is already imposing censorship. The guide bans words like torture and pyromania, basically stripping the presentation of any substance. Holden tries to improvise, but explaining psychopathy without the right vocabulary is a disaster. He can only save face by offering to show his FBI badge, the oldest trick in the book to impress kids.
Who wants to see my badge?
But the real plot twist happens behind the scenes. A teacher pulls Holden aside and mentions that Principal Wade has some rather unconventional ways of dealing with students. It sounds exactly like the start of a Law and Order SVU episode, and Holden's deviant behavior radar pings instantly. Meanwhile, back at HQ, the team meets to hire a fourth member. They interview Jim Barney, a highly competent black agent who knows psychology inside and out. He'd be the perfect hire, but Bill drops a bucket of cold water with a cruel 1970s reality check. Most Most of the serial killers they interview are racists and wouldn't talk to a black agent. Jim is cut, and who takes the spot? Greg Smith, a classic Nepo baby, son of a friend of Chief Shepherd. Greg is religious, moralistic, and looks like an altar boy who just wandered into a death metal concert. Wendy warns that his black and white view of good versus evil will be a hindrance, but orders are orders. Since Bill is taking a break from the madness and refuses to return to Oregon, Holden travels alone to interview Jerry Brudos again. Here, we see Holden's growing arrogance. Brudos tries to dominate the situation by fixing the tape recorder with rubber bands and improvised tools, but Holden plays along. The killer finally admits his fantasies were rehearsals for reality. Brudos explains that the fantasy is where he felt powerful, and the crimes were just an inevitable escalation. Holden leaves with a dangerous theory. Fantasies lead to action. This theory is the fuel Holden needs to become the Sherlock Holmes of the Tickler. He drags the rookie Greg, who is visibly uncomfortable, into an unauthorized investigation at Principal Wade's school. It's a masterclass in the office-style secondhand embarrassment. They interview teachers and parents, and opinions are split. Some think the principal is a saint, others think it's bizarre. But Holden is convinced the principal is an early-stage criminal, just like Brudos before the killing started. Greg tries to be the voice of bureaucratic reason, suggesting the FBI shouldn't be there, but Holden ignores him and confronts Principal Wade face-to-face, telling him to stop touching the children. In the middle of all this, Holden's love life is circling the drain. Debbie's car broke down, and she's been hitching rides with some guy named Patrick. Holden's jealousy hits hard. In a healthy-as-lead-paint move, he crashes a sociology experiment Debbie is conducting, which involves people interacting in total darkness. And when the lights come on, he catches Debbie and Patrick in suspicious proximity.
Come on, guys. Can you close the door, please?
He storms out, totally unable to apply his analytical psychology to his own life. The bomb drops at the office. Chief Shepherd finds out about Holden's lone crusade against the principal and is furious, since no federal crime was committed. Greg, the snitch, obviously told everything. Bill and Wendy side with the boss, warning Holden that he can't go around using his badge to validate personal hunches. Holden takes the heat with a blank stare, but learns nothing. When a school board member calls asking for a recommendation on Principal Wade, Holden, despite having no concrete evidence, suggests the behavior is pathological and dangerous. He basically nukes the guy's career based on a gut feeling, proving the power is going to his head and he's losing sight of the lines he shouldn't cross. The ADT serviceman continues his eerie routine, peering through window blinds and obsessively polishing glasses, maintaining that quintessential 80s slasher flick suspense. Meanwhile, our leads, Holden and Bill, are en route to interview none other than Richard Speck. The man is a criminal celebrity, the kind of monster that's been keeping Bill's wife and half of America awake at night. Upon arriving at the prison, they are met by Warden Armstrong, who proves the FBI's attempt at color psychology was a dismal failure. They painted the cells pink to calm the inmates, but the men just scraped the paint off with their teeth. Armstrong leads the duo to Speck's cell, which is cluttered with tributes left by his fans. Yes, the man murdered 8 nurses and still has groupies sending him provocative photos. It's a level of depravity that makes Charles Manson look like a harmless hippie. Speck couldn't care less about the FBI. He has a pet bird he rescued and treats with a strange tenderness, a Beauty and the Beast vibe minus the redemption.
Where'd you get it?
Had a broken wing. Fed a meatloaf through an eyedropper.
He refuses to talk until Holden, applying his new theory of mirroring, decides to get down in the dirt. Holden starts speaking Speck's language, using foul terms and demanding to know what gave him the right to take 8 people out of the world. Bill is visibly shaken, looking like a father watching his son swear in church. The risky tactic works. Speck is amused by the audacity, drops his guard and starts spilling his guts. He claims he didn't plan a thing. It was all chance. He killed the first one because she was crying too loud, and then had to take out the other 7 witnesses. As they leave, Holden feels like the Wolf of Wall Street, convinced he mailed the improvisation. Bill, the seasoned voice of reason, suggests they lose the tape, knowing that if the higher-ups hear Holden's language, heads will roll. Back at the office, Greg, the puritanical rookie, transcribes the interview and conveniently edits the filth, labeling it a technical glitch. It's essentially the team's first corporate fake news. During the analysis, Wendy and the team debate the nature of Speck's crimes versus Kemper's. They realize they need a new term, something that suggests a continuous narrative, like a TV series. And voila, Holden suggests the term serial killer. We are witnessing history in the making, but it's not all sunshine. Mistress Wade, the wife of the principal Holden took down in the previous episode, shows up livid. Her husband was fired and the family has become pariahs. Holden tries to dodge the guilt, acting as if he didn't dismantle a man's life based on a hunch, but the reality hits hard. Debbie watches the exchange with the look of, who exactly am I dating?
What did you do?
Nothing.
Meanwhile, a new case emerges in Georgia, a girl found dead with a coat draped over her face. The team profiles the killer, likely a local, young, and struck by immediate remorse. They point to a suspect named Dave Vier. The atmosphere turns heavy when Chief Shepard calls Wendy to warn her that the OPR, Office of Professional Responsibility, is investigating the unit. The reason? Speck complained that the FBI messed with his head. Yes, the murderer of 8 women felt offended. The team is interrogated. Holden tries to play it smart, admitting he was aggressive, but Greg and Bill lie through their teeth, claiming the tape was reused and the original audio was lost. The problem is that lies have short legs, or at least colleagues with heavy consciences. Shepard, who isn't stupid, listens to the original tape, which wasn't destroyed after all, and is absolutely livid at Holden's language. Bill suggests burning the tape and burying the matter right there. A what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas move to save the department's skin. Shepard agrees to bury the case to protect the unit, but delivers a monumental dressing down and establishes rigid rules moving forward. It seemed the day was saved by corporate white lies, until Greg, the moralistic snitch, does the unthinkable. In the dead of night, he takes the incriminating tape and mails it anonymously to the OPR. The kid just lit the fuse on a nuclear bomb in Holden's lap. Holden receives mail from his #1 fan, Ed Kemper, who is feeling lonely and wants a visit. The guy truly thinks they are BFFs. Meanwhile, the Georgia case is colder than an ex's heart because the suspect Dave Vier's polygraph was inconclusive. With no physical evidence, the only way out is to get inside the guy's head. Bill, ever the level-headed bad cop, thinks it's too risky, but Holden is convinced he can talk a wall into confessing. They head to Atlanta. Upon arrival, Holden decides to stage a theatrical performance worthy of Hollywood. He asks to pad the case file to make it look like they have mountains of evidence, grabs the victim's clothes and, the masterstroke, a random large rock and an old nightstick. The plan is to create a scenario of total psychological pressure. It's a high-stakes poker game where Holden has no cards but is betting the whole house. The interview with Dave Vier begins, and Holden dials the creep factor to the max. He starts talking about the victim, Lisa, using language that would make anyone cringe. The tactic is repulsive, attempting to build a bond of toxic male complicity with the suspect. Bill and the local cops squirm in their seats, looking like they're stuck in an episode of The Office, minus the humor. The suspect, Dave Vier, takes the bait. He starts to agree, loosens up, and when Holden slams the victim's clothes on the table and points to the rock, the trigger object, the man collapses. He can't handle the visual pressure and confesses. Holden walks out feeling like Sherlock Holmes meets Tony Stark, convinced he's reinvented the wheel of criminal investigation. But the victory goes to his head fast. Debbie points out that Holden entered the room already decided the man was guilty, a dangerous bias, but he's too busy loving himself to listen. To make matters worse, the case leaks to the press, and the local paper paints the FBI's tactics as coercion. Wendy goes into a full-blown panic. She flies to Georgia to try and convince the prosecution not to seek the death penalty. If the FBI is associated with sending people to the electric chair, no other serial killer will talk to them. The prosecutor, however, shuts her down, essentially saying that in Georgia, people love an execution. Wendy returns defeated. Holden's personal life also decides to implode. He goes to see Debbie, but instead of having a human conversation, he begins analyzing her like a research subject. He notes her distant body language and tone of voice, deducing she wants to break up. Before she can even utter the "it's not you, it's me" line, Holden stands up, accepts the breakup with robotic coldness, and leaves. The man has become nothing but his work. Back at the office, the nuclear bomb finally detonates. The OPR received the original tape of Holden's foul-mouthed interview. The snitch was Greg, obviously, but in the interrogation room, the tension is so high that Wendy snaps a "fuck you" at Bill when he suspects her.
Is this you?
Fuck you, Bill.
Holden goes in to testify and instead of bowing his head, doubles down. He takes the blame, but with supreme arrogance. He storms out, thinking he's untouchable. With no badge and no girlfriend, Holden does the only logical thing in his fractured mind. He flies to California to visit Ed Kemper in the hospital after the giant attempt. The scene is terrifying. Kemper tells Holden he could kill him right then and there, without anyone noticing, and turn him into a spirit slave. The fear is palpable, but in a bizarre twist, Kemper simply embraces Holden, a bear hug from a 6'9" serial killer. That is the breaking point. Holden's system collapses. He breaks away, stumbles into the hallway, and suffers a massive panic attack to the sounds of lead. The man who thought he could stare into the abyss without blinking just discovered that the abyss not only stared back, but gave him a tight squeeze. As he agonizes on the hospital floor, we see the ADT man burning evidence of his crimes in a barrel, a grim reminder that while the FBI brawls internally, true evil remains at large. Joanne arrives home expecting a normal day, but she finds nightmare fuel instead. She hears a strange noise, investigates, and finds her husband wearing a bizarre mask, women's clothing, and a noose around his neck in an extremely compromising position. He tries to play it off as just a joke, but the scene is so haunting she flees in a panic. If this were a horror movie, this would be the moment to scream at her not to look back. Meanwhile, the Tench family is at church, and little Brian continues his "I see dead people" vibe, remaining seated while everyone else stands. After the service, there's a neighborhood barbecue, a classic suburban American event straight out of Desperate Housewives, where everyone pretends to be happy. Nancy begs Bill to socialize and not be the weird FBI guy. He tries, talking about fishing and helping at the grill, but as soon as the neighbors find out what he does, the conversation turns into a live true crime podcast. They want blood and sordid details. Bill ends up sharing too much about killers. Nancy is furious and shuts it down. The moral? Don't invite a serial killer hunter to flip burgers if you want a light Sunday. Far away, our golden boy Holden wakes up in a hospital bed, handcuffed like he's Hannibal Lecter. The doctor explains he had a massive panic attack and prescribes Valium to settle his nerves. Bill arrives to collect the princess and gives it to him straight. Holden needs to pull himself together, suck it up, and be back at work on Monday acting like nothing happened. Bill's crisis management strategy is basically total emotional repression. At the office, change is in the air. Chief Shepard is packing his things for a voluntary retirement. Reed, he was forced out.
Bill, I'm finally doing it.
I'm sorry, sir. Doing what?
Congratulate me. I'm retiring.
Really?
Yes.
Taking the throne is Ted Gunn, a man with the air of a Silicon Valley executive who wants to revolutionize the department. Gunn is ambitious and, surprisingly, a fan of Holden's chaotic work. He calls Bill in for a private chat and drops the metaphor of the century. Holden is a prize-winning thoroughbred, and their job is to be the blinkers, so the horse stays on track. Basically, Dunn wants the results, but he wants Bill and Wendy to clean up the mess. Additionally, Bill receives cold case files from Wichita. It's about a certain BTK killer, a subject who sends poems and letters to the media bragging about his crimes. He's exactly the kind of egomaniac the team loves to hate. Bill takes one look at the crime scene photos and knows a headache is coming. Monday arrives and Holden returns to work, hopped up on Valium and with renewed confidence. He has a fancy breakfast with the new boss, Gunn, who treats him with kid gloves. Gunn asks who Holden's white whale interview is, the one Shepard never allowed. Holden doesn't hesitate, Charles Manson. Because of course, why interview chicken thieves when you can go straight to the most famous cult leader in California? Gunn, eager to show off, agrees on the spot. But before hunting Manson, the team has to air their dirty laundry. In a tense meeting, they corner Greg about the OPR leak. The rookie stammers and sweats, but finally confesses. Wendy delivers a stern lecture, demanding total transparency from here on out. Gunn interrupts the corporate drama with gifts. The internal investigation has been shelved, and they're getting a new basement. Bigger, better, and with more resources. Money solves everything, apparently. Later, Holden and Wendy head to a bar, sharing a rare moment of honesty. Holden confesses the panic attack was triggered by Ed Kemper's bear hug. Wendy, ever clinical, analyzes the situation and tells him to watch for his body's warning signs. It's almost sweet, in a dysfunctional way. The episode closes with Shepard's retirement party. It's a posh, uncomfortable event filled with fake smiles. Bill makes a toast, and Holden, in his infinite lack of social awareness, tries to have a friendly chat with his former boss in the parking lot. That's when the mask slips. Shepard reveals with pure hatred in his eyes that he was forced out just to cover for Holden's blunders. He lays the entire blame at Holden's feet. The reality check is so violent that Holden starts hyperventilating again. He hides behind a car, dry swallows a Valium, and tries to breathe. A hell of a way to start a new phase, drugged up and loathed by his mentor.
I survived a war, the streets of Baltimore and Hoover, and I'm finally being finished off by you.
If you thought your neighbor was weird, wait until you see the domestic scene at the Rader household. Joanne tucks her husband into bed with tender care, thinking he's an angel. But as soon as she leaves, Dennis, better known as BTK, picks up some light bedtime reading. Nothing like studying the theory of your own madness to unwind, right? Meanwhile, Bill Tench lands in Kansas and meets Detective Bernie. The two share that instant connection of weary cops who have seen far too much. They head straight to the Otero family home, ground zero for the BTK crimes. The place is abandoned, with overgrown grass and that haunted house. The vibe is incredibly heavy. Bernie mentions the killer cut the phone lines, a detail that traumatized the entire town for years. They realize BTK went out of his way to create a scenario of psychological terror before the killings, forcing the children to watch it all. The investigation leads Bill and Bernie to a tense meeting inside a car with Kevin Bright, a survivor. The man is so traumatized he keeps a loaded gun in the back seat. Kevin narrates his brush with death. He and his sister were tied up. He was shot in the face and had to play dead while the killer returned to finish off his sister. The macabre detail? The killer stole a watch as a trophy. Kevin bolts out of the car, unable to stay another second, making it clear that the trauma never truly leaves. The visit gets under Bill's skin. He arrives home paranoid, notices the back door is unlocked, and goes into full security mode. When he discovers Nancy simply forgot to lock it, a tense silence falls over the couple. Bill lights a cigarette, trying not to spiral over the fact that evil could walk into his home at any moment. Back at the office, the mood shifts. Holden arrives full of energy, looks at the BTK board, and drops a truth bomb. This guy isn't some random drifter. He's organized, has a job, and likely studies other killers to hone his craft. But the priority now is another criminal celebrity, David Berkowitz, the infamous son of Sam. Wendy isn't thrilled about the change in schedule, but signs off on it. Before the trip, Wendy and Bill share a moment of honesty at a bar. They discuss Holden's panic attacks and establish that Bill will be his emotional babysitter during the interview. Wendy also has a subtle scene with the bartender, exchanging looks of understanding as the woman brushes off some annoying guys. It's that silent code that needs no subtitles.
That really worked.
People see what they want to see. Let me know if I can get you anything else.
Thanks for dropping by.
We reach the main attraction, the maximum security prison, to interview the son of Sam. Berkowitz arrives with a classic story about how a dog possessed by, get this, a demon, told him to kill. Holden, with his confidence restored, or perhaps just medicated, isn't buying this B-movie plot. He pressures Berkowitz, calling the story a lie made up to sell newspapers. And it works. Berkowitz's ego takes over. He admits the dog story was an act to look insane and avoid the electric chair. Or worse, to avoid being seen as just another loser rejected by women. He reveals his crimes were fueled by fantasies and frustration, and that he'd return to the crime scenes to relive the moment, rolling on the ground where the victims died. It's pathetic and terrifying all at once. Back at base, the teen analyzes the fallout. Wendy points out that Berkowitz created his own mythology because his reality, being a mediocre, rejected man, was too painful to face. They realize they need a new category for these media-savvy killers, but the episode saves its gut punch for the end. Bill is having dinner at home when the police knock on the door. It's not a social visit. A body was found in a house Nancy was showing as a realtor. The violence Bill studies all day has just parked in his own garage, and Nancy, without knowing it, may have crossed paths with a killer. The episode kicks off with a sinister vibe, showing our favorite ADT psychopath being kicked out of a library. The guy is there sketching bound women with the dedication of a Renaissance artist, only the serial killer version. Meanwhile, at the Tench residence, the atmosphere is heavier than a Breaking Bad season finale. Nancy is completely traumatized after a body was found in the house she was selling, and little Brian has started wetting to bed again. Never a good sign in horror movies or psychological dramas. To deal with the domestic chaos, Bill decides to lie to his boss, claiming he's sick so he doesn't have to go to Atlanta. He sends Holden alone, which is basically like giving a child a box of matches and hoping for the best. In Atlanta, Holden is met by Jim Barney, the guy who nearly took Greg's job. The first stop is an interview with William Pierce Jr., a criminal who swears he speaks 7 languages, including one he invented himself. The guy has the IQ of a doorknob, and Jim Barney shines here. He gains the suspect's trust using candy, literally.
You want one?
Love one. Thanks, you're offering 2.
A pack of Malamars gets the killer to confess to everything. It's cringeworthy to watch Holden try to have intellectual conversations with a guy who is practically the dumb and dumber of crime. At the hotel, the receptionist, Tanya, flirts with Holden. Our socially inept Sherlock Holmes thinks he's getting lucky and accepts a dinner invitation. He gets into her beat-up car expecting a romantic date, but ends up in an emotional ambush. Tanya takes him to meet a group of desperate mothers. The mood shifts entirely. These are the mothers of Atlanta, women whose black children are disappearing while local local police dismiss the cases as simple runaways. Holden is handed a heavy dossier and promises to help, switching into white savior mode, but one of the mothers makes it clear that empty promises mean nothing. Meanwhile, Bill visits the crime scene house. The scene is brutal. Local police are already eager to blame satanic cults. Classic 70s and 80s panic, but Bill knows reality is usually less The Exorcist and more human tragedy. The situation worsens when Nancy discovers the victim was the son of a friend from church. She breaks down, and Bill realizes the evil he studies at work has officially invaded his living room. Back in Atlanta, Holden and Jim interview William Henry, another killer who isn't exactly a criminal mastermind. The guy killed women and wrote letters to the police pretending to be a group of white vigilantes to throw them off. Holden tries to bring his concerns about the missing children to local authorities but gets a cold shower. The New South politics don't want to scare off investors with rumors of a serial killer on the loose. Money talks louder than justice, as always. At FBI HQ, the team analyzes the tapes. Holden feels he wasted time interviewing stupid people, but Wendy saves the day by pointing out that behavioral data is valuable, regardless of IQ. Greg tries to be useful by quoting Ed Kemper, and Bill makes it home in time for a church meeting. There, he has to calm down neighbors who think the devil moved onto their street.
I respect everyone's frustrations, but let me reassure you, this has nothing to do with a cult or anything like that. Rod?
And to close with a bit of hope, or at least some fun, Wendy goes to the bar, flirts with the bartender Kay, and finally scores a date. At least someone is winning in the middle of all this chaos. We see Holden and Greg staging kidnappings with children to teach them about stranger danger. It's got that 80s PSA vibe, don't get in the car for $2. And of course, when Greg tries to apply this in real life to recruit helpers for a project, he fails miserably. The guy has the charisma of a wall, and ends up getting roasted by a group of kids who basically accuse him of being an undercover cop. Total The Office level secondhand embarrassment. While Bill discovers his police contact died while watching TV, a depressing way to go, Holden gathers the team to talk about Atlanta. It's serious. 11 children missing, 8 dead. Holden has already built the profile, a black man in his 20s, but nobody wants to believe it because politics and racism are blinding everyone. Gunn, the new boss who looks like a Wall Street executive, sees an opportunity and authorizes the investigation, but urges caution. And now, a romantic break because even profilers need love. Wendy meets Kay for a date at a bowling alley. We see Dr. Wendy, usually so rigid, forced to wear rental shoes and lose her Ice Queen composure. For the first time, she truly opens up, admitting her previous relationship was a cliche of brilliant student and experienced professor. Kay, being the most sensible bartender in history, gives her a reality check about living honestly. They kiss, and finally, Wendy looks happy. Back at work, the focus shifts to Elmer Wayne Hemley Jr., accomplished to the serial killer Dean, the Candyman. While Holden and Bill are called to Atlanta because of a kidnapping that crossed state lines, giving the FBI jurisdiction, Wendy decides she'll interview Henley herself, taking Greg along as her glorified intern. In Atlanta, the situation is frustrating. The local task force has the energy of a government office on a Friday afternoon. Nobody is doing anything. Holden presents his profile to Commissioner Brown. The local crowd scoffs, preferring to believe in a hate group or anything else that won't spark a race war in the city. In prison, the interview with Henley is tense. The guy eats Greg for breakfast, refusing to cooperate. That's when Wendy shines. She uses her own history with her controlling ex-lover to create a connection with Henley. It's a masterstroke, pure Mindhunter. Henley drops his guard and confesses the sick dynamic with Dean. His only role was to lure people to the place in exchange for money, claiming he just watched. The guy denies being gate of a death, spitting homophobia. Wendy surgically dismantles his psyche.
So you're not a faggot? Not a killer?
A boy got involved with a murderer.
But Bill Tench's world is about to collapse. Nancy calls him in a panic so many times that he has to lie to Holden, saying his mother-in-law fell, and flies home. What awaits him is worse than any horror movie. The local detective tells him the truth. Little Brian wasn't just a passive witness. The kid stole the key to the real estate house and took the older boys there. And the most macabre detail? It was Brian's idea to put the body on the cross in a twisted attempt to resurrect the child. While Bill tries to process the fact that he has the Antichrist from The Omen living in his house, Holden gets a cold shower in Atlanta. Since there was no ransom demand in the kidnapping case, the FBI loses jurisdiction and is invited to leave. Holden is furious, knowing a killer is on the loose, but bureaucracy wins this round. The episode closes with the crushing weight of reality falling on everyone's heads. The ADT man continues his sinister routine, burying boxes in the middle of nowhere like a squirrel stashing nuts for the winter, only the psychopath version. Meanwhile, at the Tench house, the atmosphere is heavier than an HBO family drama finale. Nancy clings to the narrative that Brian was just watching, but the reality is grim. The child had suggested an extreme ritual, thinking a Lazarus-style resurrection would happen. Bill tries to be the voice of reason, but Nancy is terrified Bill take her son away and stays in total denial. At the office, the new boss, Gunn, is livid. The team was kicked out of Atlanta in record time because Holden's profile, suggesting the killer is a black man, offended local politicians. Bill, stepping into the loyal partner role Lethal Weapon style, takes the heat to protect Holden. But in the hallway, he tears into the golden boy, telling him to shut his mouth until he has concrete proof, a break for Wendy's personal life. She and Kay are in the honeymoon phase, going to the movies and having romantic nights. But Wendy, used to analyzing everything, trips up after missing the movie trailers, which drives Wendy crazy. At an intimate moment at Kay's apartment, the psychologist tries to insert herself into the life of Kay's son. Kay metaphorically slams the door in her face, making it clear that for the child's sake, Wendy isn't meeting the kid anytime soon. Absolute awkwardness. Back at work, the team gets the golden ticket of criminology, an interview with Charles Manson.
One more thing. I got you, Manson.
When? 3 weeks.
But before the trip, Bill and Nancy face real bureaucracy. Brian won't be prosecuted, but they get a shadow, a social worker named Mavis, who snoops around the house looking for reasons to judge the family. Bill warns Nancy that this woman is not their friend, but Nancy keeps acting like it's all just a big misunderstanding. In California, Bill and Holden visit Ed Kemper before the main course. Kemper is jealous, acting like an ex-girlfriend who just found out you moved on. He knows they're going to see Manson and warns them that the guy is tiny and overrated. Kemper also drops a chilling theory about killers who live in their fantasies and are never caught, a clear nod to our ADT man. Showtime. Charles Manson makes a performative entrance, climbing onto the back of his chair like a gargoyle. He speaks in riddles, denies ordering the hits, says Helter Skelter wasn't his idea, and blames his children of the system followers. The guy is peak annoying, looping the agents in cheap philosophical talk. Bill loses his patience, calls Manson a shrimp, and ends the interview. Manson, being the troll he is, steals Holden's sunglasses just to prove he's in control. Bill has to fly home for his son's mandatory therapy, arriving late, of course, because Murphy's Law never fails, leaving Holden alone in California to interview Tex Watson. Tex is the polar opposite of Manson, calm, born again in Jesus, and full of regret. He confirms that Manson stripped away their fear through drugs and manipulation, turning them into living weapons. Basically, Manson loaded the gun and they pulled the trigger. Back home, Gunn throws a fancy party to show off the team. The boss is super invasive with Wendy, unzipping her dress in a move that screams HR lawsuit. Wendy also has to dodge the advances of Warren Freeman, a big shot who thinks her being single is an open invitation. Bill, out of place as ever, ends up having to save Holden from boring the guests with technical details about homicides. The episode closes with a bucket of cold water from Atlanta. Jim calls to report they found another body. As Holden takes notes, he sees that Manson autographed his book with a far from comforting message. Every night while you sleep, I destroy the world. Sleep tight. Our favorite ADT psychopath continues his saga, but this time his nemesis is a jammed Xerox machine. His frustration is palpable. When a coworker tries to help, he catches a glimpse of a bizarre symbol on one of the copies. Paranoia kicks in. The killer grabs the paper, making it clear his work of art isn't for just anyone's eyes. Meanwhile, at FBI headquarters, the team discusses the case of Paul Bateson, a killer who confessed to one murder but is suspected of many more. Wendy gives a masterclass on the distinction between BDSM and murder, but Holden's mind is elsewhere. The missing children in Atlanta. Assistant Director Gunn goes into full West Wing mode, leaning on everyone. The president wants to score points during his first 100 days in office, so Holden is dispatched to Atlanta immediately. Bill, on the other hand, has to attend a luxury retreat for directors before joining the hunt. Bureaucratic priorities, right? At the Tench household, the atmosphere is heavier than a Sundance-winning indie drama. Brian has completely regressed. He's back to wetting the bed and playing with baby toys. Nancy is in absolute denial, trying to hide the wet sheets, while the therapist, Dr. Moritz, insists the boy needs to process the trauma rather than pretend nothing happened. Bill tries to offer support, but Nancy effectively shuts him out, claiming she'll handle it alone. Wendy decides to lead the Bateson interview, taking Greg along for the ride. In prison, Bateson is chillingly articulate. He speaks about violence as a form of profound connection, and describes the murder of Addison with a coldness that feels like a slasher movie script. When Wendy tries to pivot the conversation to link into other unidentified bodies, Bateson spots the move instantly. He cuts the talk short, stands up, and ends the interview, leaving Wendy frustrated and later mocked by her girlfriend that night. In Atlanta, Holden clashes with the local commissioner, Redding, who is betting everything on the crimes being the work of an organized hate group. Holden, with his modern-day Sherlock Holmes intuition, knows this is a dead end and that the police tips are mostly pranks. He reunites with Tanya at the hotel, who gives him the cold, hard truth. The missing kids weren't just selling air fresheners. The rabbit hole goes much deeper, involving and drugs, realities the local PD prefers to ignore. Bill suffers through the Fat Cat retreat, trying to explain serial killer psychology to a bunch of executives who just want to smoke cigars and hear macabre stories. As soon as he's free, he flies to Atlanta to back Holden up. The dynamic shifts instantly. They manage to mobilize police academy recruits to search old body dumping grounds, something that should have been done months ago. During the search in a wooded area, the team finds what they feared, a human skeleton. Nearby, they find adult magazines and physical evidence. The prints on the magazines lead to a local plumber with a minor record. Holden looks at the profile and calls foul. The guy stole tires. He's not a child predator, but Bill, the pragmatic law and order style cop, insists they follow the physical evidence if only to rule the guy out. To get the arrest warrant, the duo has to crash a gala and corner DA Slayton. He agrees, but with a mafia-style condition: zero press. Everything must be done under the radar. Cut to a disappointing reality. The moment the police arrest the plumber, the media is already swarming the door like paparazzi chasing Britney Spears. The episode ends with the circus in full swing and the certainty that this investigation is about to become absolute chaos. The noose tightens in Atlanta, feeling like a tense episode of The Wire. Bill and Holden are tossing the suspect plumber's truck, looking for that definitive smoking gun. They find rope and duct tape, a handyman's basics, or a serial killer's kick, depending on your perspective. The big proof ends up being adult magazines with the suspect's bodily fluids on them. Is it gross? Yes. Is it proof of murder? Not exactly. But Bill is desperate enough to try and make it stick. In the interrogation room, the classic psychological games begin. The plumber plays dumb, but Jim Barney, the local agent and the real MVP of this season, pulls a masterstroke. He hands a cup of coffee to the plumber, causing him to leave a perfect set of fingerprints.
I got it. Sorry about that.
The guy confesses to being a creep who used the magazines in the woods, but swears he never killed anyone. Then comes the plot twist that ruins everyone's day. While they're squeezing the plumber, a fresh body turns up. Our suspect had the perfect alibi. He was being interrogated by the FBI. The plumber is released, but his life is already ruined because the media and politicians had already tried and convicted him in the court of public opinion. Holden is livid. They wasted precious time chasing a man who didn't even fit the profile. Holden, in full obsessive noir detective mode, realizes the real killer is watching the news and playing with them. He dumps bodies in areas the police just finished searching just to taunt them. Holden's new strategy: use the media. He wants to create fake memorials and vigils to lure the psychopath out, betting the killer's ego will bring him back to the scene. Meanwhile, Bill's domestic life is competing for most depressing drama of the year. His son Brian has turned into a statue. He doesn't speak, doesn't play, he just stares into the void. Things get unbearable when the mother of the dead guy, the one Brian saw die, shows up at Nancy's door. She's there on a Christian mission to say she forgives Brian. It's one of the most uncomfortable scenes in the series. Nancy is visibly shaken, barely holding it together in front of the visitor. At the Quantico office, Wendy finds no peace either. Assistant Director Gunn wants to keep her chained to her desk, analyzing data instead of letting her do field interviews. At home, her relationship with Kay sours. Kay wants to move in and share a life, but Wendy treats the situation like a lease agreement. Wendy's lack of emotional tact is glaring, and Kay realizes she might not fit into the doctor's meticulously organized closet. Back in the chaos of Atlanta, a boiler explodes at a daycare, and the city panics, thinking it's a bombing. At a church meeting, the mayor tries to calm the crowds, but the community is furious and demands accountability from the extremist group. Camille Bell takes the stage and delivers a powerful speech, reminding everyone that black children are and no one seems to care enough. This forces the police to open a secret investigation into an extremist group, and Bill agrees to be the FBI liaison, which infuriates Holden. Holden is certain it's a lone killer, not a group of hooded racists. The disagreement creates a rift in their bromance. The episode culminates in a surreal scene. 3 federal agents sitting on the floor, frantically assembling wooden crosses like a late-night school project. Holden has to race against the clock, literally running through the streets to plant the cross along the route of the Mother's March torch before the procession arrives. He makes it, but the victory is short-lived. At the bar, Jim brings the news no one wanted to hear. They found Luby's body. The pattern holds. The killer is loose, and the body count rises while the bureaucracy stays deadlocked. Bill and Agent Garland are in a car on a classic stakeout, watching the Sanders brothers' porch. The vibe is total Dukes of Hazzard, but without the fun and with a lot more racial hatred. They discover the Sanders family is essentially the operational arm of a local white supremacist group. After wiretapping the phones, they intercept a revolting conversation in which one of them spews pure hatred toward the victims. It looks like they've got their man, right? Wrong. They bring this Charles character into the box, convinced they're closing the case. Bill plays the tape for him, but the guy is slick. He admits he's a racist, says hate isn't a crime, and, get this, passes the polygraph 3 times in a row. It's LA. Noir levels of frustration when you pick the wrong dialogue option. Bill wants to throttle him, but without physical evidence and with the polygraph reading truthful, they are forced to let him go. Meanwhile, Holden, who sat in the corner like a decorative vase during the interrogation, already knew it would lead nowhere. He's on to another elaborate plan. There's a benefit show coming up with Frank Sinatra and Sammy Davis Jr., the Rat Pack in the flesh, and Holden is sure the killer will try to infiltrate the event's security. He wants to interview every security candidate, creating a sieve to catch the madman. Commissioner Brown is hesitant, worried the FBI is focusing only on black suspects and ignoring a powerful hate group, which would be a political nightmare. But with no other leads and the body count rising, he clears the operation. Speaking of complicated relationships, the team's personal lives remain a wreck. Wendy goes to pick Kay up for their date and overhears her answering the door, completely changing her voice and persona to talk to her ex-husband and son, pretending to be someone she's not. Wendy, who has the emotional tolerance of a robot programmed for absolute truth, can't stomach it. Later, she confronts Kay at her door and ends things brutally, throwing it in her face that Kay is just a bartender who reads gossip magazines. Wendy, master of criminal profiles, failure at human empathy. On Bill's side, the situation at home is unsustainable. Nancy wants to move, to escape the memories in Brian's trauma. Bill tries to connect with his son by taking him for ice cream, but it's one of the saddest scenes of the season. The boy barely speaks, and when he does, it's to ask if the fish they caught died. Bill begs for any sign of normalcy, but Brian remains isolated in his own bizarre world.
I ever tell you that? How my dad took me fishing?
Back in Atlanta, Holden's theory gets a forced upgrade. A new body appears in a river, but without any carpet fibers. Holden clicks instantly. The killer is learning. He saw the news about the fibers and changed his MO to dump bodies in the water to wash away the evidence. The only solution? Stake out all 14 bridges in the city. It's a logistical nightmare requiring every available officer. We get a montage of Bill and Holden suffering through mosquitoes, heat, bad coffee, and roadside bathroom breaks. Days turn into nights. Nothing happens, and the police budget runs dry. The chief warns them it's the last night of the operation. Either they catch the guy now, or it's over. Holden, desperate, even tries to shake down a street kid for info on who pays for photos, finding a lead about a house near the stadium. But time has run out. At the 0 hour, on the last shift of the last night, when everyone was nearly asleep at the wheel, the radio crackles to life. An officer hears a loud splash in the water. Jim Barney sees a suspicious station wagon coming off the bridge and boxes it in. Bill and Holden arrive at a run to find Jim approaching the driver. The man is calm, wears glasses, and asks if he was stopped because of those boys. His name is Wayne Williams, and if you know the true story, you know the game just changed. Right after the splash, a frustrating game of cat and mouse begins. The police scour the river but find nothing immediately. Meanwhile, Holden and Bill try to corner Wayne Williams, the driver of the station wagon. The guy is a silver-tongued talker, says he's a music producer, a talent scout, a real entrepreneur, but his story about visiting a Cheryl Johnson at 3 a.m. doesn't hold water. Holden finds nylon rope and gloves in the back seat, the serial killer starter kit, but police bureaucracy gets in the way. No body, no crime. They are forced to release him, and he leaves with the nonchalance of someone who just cut in line at the grocery store. It's enough to make you bite the table in rage. The team begins 24-hour surveillance on Williams. Holden is obsessed and pulls a clever move by asking to use the bathroom at the suspect's house, just to prove he has a dog, something Wayne had denied, and wouldn't you know it, the dog barks. Point for Holden. Their luck finally turns when a body is found drowned in the river. Nathaniel. There's just one bizarre detail. The victim is an adult male, not a child. This messes with the profile, but the carpet fibers and dog hair match the samples from Williams. It's old school forensics, long before TV glamorized the lab work. By now, the press has leaked Williams' name, and the circus is ablaze. Instead of hiding like any normal person, Wayne thrives in the spotlight. He holds improvised press conferences on his lawn, hands out resumes, and acts like a celebrity wronged by the system, like a politician caught in a scandal swearing his innocence. He even has the audacity to drive to the mayor's house, honking and yelling for him to come out, creating a media spectacle. The man's ego is bigger than the Atlanta stadium. While Holden and Bill try to connect Wayne to the murders, politics tramples everything. The case is burning the city's image, and the authorities want a quick scapegoat. When they discover Wayne's father was trying to buy one-way tickets to South America, the police use it as flight risk justification and finally arrest him. But the victory tastes like ash. He is only charged with the murders of the 2 adults. The 27 dead children, they are left in legal limbo, considered resolved by proxy just to clear the city's stats. In the most bitter ending possible, Holden goes to speak with the victims' mothers and gets a reality check. Camille Bell, the most vocal mother, throws it in his face. This isn't justice. It's a formality to close the case and calm the public. And if work feels empty, his personal life is a desert. Bill Tance returns home dreaming of rest after this nightmare, only to find the house completely empty. No furniture, no wife, no son. Nancy got tired of waiting and left, taking little Brian with her. Bill stands there alone in the middle of the living room, realizing he saved the city, maybe, but lost his own family. To close the season with a chill down the spine and a reminder that evil never takes a holiday, we see our mysterious ADT friend in Kansas. In a motel room, dressed in women's clothing and a mask, he practices auto-assassination before his macabre trophies. While Atlanta breathes a false sigh of relief, BTK continues to evolve, proving that Holden and Bill's fight is nowhere near over.